2003. My name is Roberta Charles. I'm a trustee of the Westbury Memorial Public Library and a board member of the Westbury Historical Society. Interviewing Owen F. Dunford of 27 Dogwood Lane, Westbury, New York, zip of 11590. We're going to start with Mr. Dunford's World War II service summary. He's in the New York National Guard, 165th Regiment, 27th Division, in 1939 at age 19. He was mustered into the regular Army on August 1st, 1940. He received infantry, basic training, and special training in the United States, 1940 to 1941. Sent to Hawaii after Pearl Harbor on December 7th, remained at this post 1.5 years. Subsequently sent back to the United States, assigned to special training with the 10th Mountain Division, sent to Italy via North Africa in 1943. Fought in Italy until the war's end and was honorably discharged. September 23, 1945. Re-enlisted August 20th, 1946. Sent to Panama, detached service as a driver for Major General Brooks, commanding general for the Caribbean. Honorably discharged August 3rd, 1949. Basic training was as infantryman, rifleman, mortarman, ski trooper, auto mechanic, lineman, cook, driver, highest rank sergeant. The medals that Mr. Dunford has received are the Bronze Star Medal, the Good Conduct Medal, American Defense Service Medal, American Campaign Medal, European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, Combat Infantryman Badge, Honorable Service Lapel Button for World War II. Starting out with the following of some of Mr. Dunford's experiences in World War II. In Mr. Dunford's words, our National Guard Division trained before the war in Plattsburgh, New York, with mostly World War I equipment. We were mustered into the regular Army on August 1st, 1940. We were sent to Fort McClellan in Alabama for basic training. I remember one particular blackout maneuver we were on. We were traveling through Arkansas, Tennessee, and Louisiana. I was driving a 2.5-ton truck. No lights of any kind were permitted, not even a lit cigarette. There was a hog on the road, and I couldn't see it. I ran into the hog, and it was killed. That hog was so big and weighed so much that on impact, the front end of my truck was demolished. The Army reimbursed the farmer.
There was an investigation on the accident, and the farmer was reimbursed for the hog.
Arriving at our Louisiana campsite, I backed up my truck and trailer at my assigned location. My trailer immediately sank and disappeared in quicksand.
All the kitchen equipment was aboard the trailer, except for the stove, and it just sunk out of sight.
And what happened to the truck itself? Did you have to, as the trailer was sinking, were you able to detach it from the truck?
Yeah, we detached the trailer from the truck because the truck was, the yoke on the trailer was sticking up in the air, so we discharged it, Later on they pulled the trailer out, but
were you able to resurrect any of the equipment that was on the trailer?
yes, they got the pots and pans and stuff like that.
Okay, at this Louisiana campsite, these are Mr. Dunford's words again. At this Louisiana campsite, we camped outside to a tent. During the night, a snake crawled into the tent and curled up between us. This woke us up and we kicked the snake out. Do you know what kind of a snake it was? You think it was a rattle? Oh, a poisonous snake. You think a rattlesnake or a water moccasin. And I guess it came in and crawled in because it was cold and it wanted to get warm. Okay. When this maneuver was concluded, we returned to Fort McClellan. Now we're arriving at Pearl Harbor. Directly after the incident at Pearl Harbor, we were sent to California. Our mission was to guard the McDonnell Douglas plant in Santa Monica. The people in California expected to be invaded by the Japanese. They were enthusiastically glad to see the army. We soldiers were treated as though we were heroes. Nothing was too good for us. The people often invited soldiers out to dinner or to their homes. I was invited, along with some buddies, to dinner and a tour around town by Fred McMurray. There were many others who looked after us kindly and generously.
As we were shown around Hollywood and Vine, we went to the Chinese theater, and also Mickey Roney joined up with us, and we continue to see around the town. Okay. We also went out to dinner with a couple of friends of mine, some buddies.
Okay, and Mr. Owen, Mr. Dunford's words again. We were sent from Santa Monica to San Francisco, where we awaited the transport to Hawaii. We sailed to Hawaii on the Aquitania, a British ship converted to troop carrier. The Aquitania was escorted across the Pacific by only one American cruiser. I was assigned the manning of the 20-millimeter cannon. We docked in Honolulu and saw the destruction the Japanese had inflicted on Pearl Harbor. From Pearl Harbor, we were transported to the island of Kauai. I was there for about a year and a half. In that time, we installed gun emplacements and barbed wire on the beaches. I was also assigned to the cleanup of World War I ammunition dumps, in parentheses, mustard gas, shells, high explosive shells that were leaking, and other ordnance, that nice word for weaponry. We carried the stuff off and dumped it in the ocean. I remember that while in Kauai, we were quartered close to a Japanese Shinto temple. Next door was a Chinese, I think, butcher shop/restaurant, close to which pigs were penned for future slaughter. These pigs seemed to know that they were going to be killed. They screamed ceaselessly, sounding like people. It was impossible to sleep. We felt sorry for the pigs. Were the pigs screeching during the night, too? Again, in Mr. Dunford's words, while in Kauai, our company, the 165th K Company, took ranger training. I particularly remember a training exercise where we had to jump from a bridge into a small but deep river, carrying full equipment on our backs. In addition to this equipment, I carried a Browning automatic, the only Browning in the squad. What was supposed to happen, and it did for everyone but me, was that you jumped, you sank, and then you floated up to the surface, and then swam, held up by your pack, to the other shore. I jumped, sank, and stayed there on the bottom. My pack was too heavy because of the Browning. Realizing that I was not going to float up, I dropped the Browning, the ammunition belt, and my helmet, and proceeded to walk to shore, underwater, across the riverbed. They were surprised to see me climbing, rising out of the water when I got to the other shore. The equipment I had to jettison was retrieved. When you came out, I guess you were directed where to go, but you didn't panic when you were underwater?
No, I didn't panic. I just wanted to get rid of the weight on me so I could get. It wasn't too far to shore, so I just walked along up the bridge onto the beach.
Quick story. Okay, after this, now continuing, our company was then sent to Oahu. We waited for transport to the South Pacific. While we waited, we were employed repairing a campsite. I was sent out for a load of gravel, and while driving back with this heavy load on my truck, on a narrow mountain road, the brakes failed. This happened when I was at the crest of the upward winding road. Going downhill, the truck gathered great speed, and I had no choice but to jump out of the cab, luckily safely. The truck crashed into the ravine below. At this time, the Army asked for a cadre of NCOs to go back to the States to form a new division. Fortunately, I was one of the NCOs selected. We traveled back to America on a Navy transport. This ship was an old ship with a lot of problems. It had had engine troubles and was being sent back to the States for repairs. On this ship, along with my group of NCOs, were Marines who had survived the Battle of Guadalcanal. Most of these men suffered from shock and the most intense battle fatigue. They were very sick. While on the ship, we pulled duty, cleaning, scraping, and painting the ship. We happened to find a place in the hold of the ship that was fairly empty. My buddies and I often went there to play pinochle. At that time, we did not know that the ship had the serious engine problems mentioned above. We were down in this hole playing pinochle one day when general quarters were sounded. The ship was dead in the water and thus vulnerable to attack. There was no power, nothing was working. Thus, all the watertight bulkheads were closed. We couldn't get out and up on deck, so we stayed in the hold and continued to play cards. It was a big pot until power was restored. We finally landed in San Francisco and were transported to Fort Ord in California. We stayed there 3 months waiting for orders,
which we had time to go around and explore. From there, we went to Hawaii. While we were waiting for orders to go to Colorado, we had a lot of time on our hands, and we were given passes, so we were allowed to go up the creek, which is Crossings Creek, and we planned for gold. Then we got a little gold together when we went to Reno, Nevada. Well, it wasn't too much, like a few dollars. But I remember we landed in Reno, Nevada, and the first thing they did was hit the slot machines. And I wasn't lucky when I did, but my friend put a dollar in, and he hit the jackpot. So we had a good time. We went to lunch and everything else there. And no, I don't recall the prize of the money. That was not. We had a good dinner out of it, and we had a good time in Reno.
Again in Mr. Dunford's words, we were then sent to Camp Hale in Colorado. This is leaving Fort Ord. At Camp Hale, we were formed into a new division, the 10th Mountain Division. Here we took ski instructions, mountain climbing, and maneuvering in cold weather. The weather at Camp Hale could be full of surprises. In the middle of April, we had a big snowstorm. When we woke up, we found that it had snowed so much during the night that the snow was piled very high, nearly up to the second-story windows of our barracks. We had to exit through the fire escape on the second floor on snowshoes to begin the cleanup of the camp and roads. We were often sent on maneuvers in deep snow. On one such maneuver, my job as telephone lineman was to lay wire. I, with another soldier, was sent out to lay communications wires between headquarters company and the line company. It was snowing heavily. I was in front laying the wire. The other soldier was feeding it out. I didn't see the snow bridge which covered the crevasse because of the poor visibility. I fell in. This crevasse, it turned out, was very deep, about 10 feet. My companion tried to pull me out using a communications wire. It was too thin, it kept breaking. I told him to go back and get help. I expected him back with help in a couple of hours. He didn't come back. There must have been a reason, but I never found out what it was. I never saw him again. I spent the night in this crevasse, what kept me alive down there all night long in below 40-degree weather were my furious attempts, all futile, to scale the walls of this deep hole and get out. The rescue crew found me in the morning.
Angry with him, I tried to crawl out of it and could last myself by putting my feet against one wall and pushing up and kept falling.
From Colorado, we went to Texas for flat land trading, tanks, artillery, etc. From Texas, we went to Newport News, Virginia for transport to Italy. We were sent on the steamship America. On this journey, we ran into a big squall. The plates were knocked off the sleeping deck. Soldiers and their gear were awash in seawater. Toilets were overflowing. Men were sick. It was a mess. We landed in North Africa and were loaded on narrow gauge trains and taken to a port for transport to Italy. During this train journey, there were many, many natives begging for cigarettes. We were transported to Italy on a small Italian ship. Now Mr. Dunford is in Italy. Now in Italy in 1944, we landed in Naples. The 10th Mountain joined the 5th Army in Italy. It was intended that we would fight in the mountains of Italy. We were what you would call light infantry. Moving up from Naples, our first stop was Pisa. The regiment was assigned different sectors of the front. We were sent north to Florence and proceeded into the combat zone. I remember being shelled and diving into a drainage ditch. I bumped heads with another steel helmet, a helmet which looked like a German helmet. I thought it was all over, my arm was twisted, my rifle was behind me. The man said something in a foreign language. It didn't sound like German. It turned out he was a Brazilian. Then I remembered that a detachment of Brazilian soldiers had been sent to our area. When the barrage lifted, we looked at each other and shook hands. He didn't understand my language, and I didn't understand his. It didn't matter. We were on the same side. We were friends, and we were glad. Then there was the time we were camped next to a cemetery. That night, the Germans began a shelling barrage. Everybody ran for cover, ran into the cemetery. That was a horrible night. The Germans aimed for the cemetery. I guess they knew we were there. Their shells created mayhem, blowing open graves and other cemetery structures, strewing the ground with the dead. We spent a terrible night with these exhumed corpses all around us. We moved out, finally, when the shelling stopped. Fighting in this terrain was very difficult. Many mountains, next to no roads, only trails, mud everywhere. I was sent off in a jeep with ammunition and water to some of our men who were fighting and out of supplies. At a particular point on this journey, the jeep could go no further because of the mud. The only alternative was to carry the water up to the men, and I thought I would never make it. The mud was almost waist deep. I thought I would die from exhaustion. On the return trip, they sent 2 men back with me to bring up the remaining supplies. You were alone in the jeep when the jeep got stuck in the mud?
Yes, I was. I was alone in the jeep. And they took the remaining ammunition and water up there, and I was allowed to get out of there. They helped me get out of the situation I was in. The mud was up to the hubcaps in the jeep, so they had to push and pull, and we finally made it out of there.
Again, in Mr. Dunford's words, I remember on the road to the Po Valley, we were again being shelled. We jumped out of our vehicles and ran across the fields. To my surprise, I came upon a wounded German soldier sitting against a tree. As I passed, he called to me asking for water. I went to him and saw he had suffered a severe stomach wound, and I knew it was wrong to give him water. It would kill him, and I told him this. A medic went by. I called to him and asked him to help the German. He said he couldn't help because there were so many wounded already going unattended. I sat down with the German. He took out his wallet and showed me pictures of his family. I stayed for a little while, but I had to go on. I had to keep moving. When I left, he asked me again for water. I gave him my water bottle and left. There was nothing I could do. In the Po Valley, I got separated from my outfit. I didn't make it to the pontoon bridge where our trucks were going across, so I went down to where they were putting supplies onto the ducks for transport across the river. I hitched a ride on one of these ducks. We were crossing the river, and the Germans opened up with harassing fire. Shells were exploding overhead. The duck started going around in circles. The driver had been killed. The 3 men in the duck with me were wounded or dead. I got into the driver's seat and took the duck across. I was the only soldier unharmed. The lieutenant in charge of the beachhead told me my outfit had already gone, and they put me on a vehicle to catch up with them. While still in the Po Valley, there was another time when my truck lost its brakes. This time it happened on the way to Florence. I was driving a half-track to Ordnance for repair. Another half-track was following me. My half-track had electric brakes on it. This was mountainous country. I was headed downhill very fast toward a town. The brakes went out. Up in front of me was a small Italian town to which I was heading. Narrow road through the town, buildings flush up against both sides of the road. The driver in the half-track behind me turned his siren on in order to warn the people on the road. They scattered when they saw what was coming. What happened was, when I got down to the bottom of the hill and started up the next hill, the half-track slowed up on this incline and slid back. The driver in the other half-track behind stopped mine as it traveled backwards. Thankfully, disaster was averted. Again, the Po Valley. Somewhere in the Po Valley, I was in a truck along with other soldiers, a maintenance squad. We came across an abandoned German vehicle, and it turned out to be an armored truck carrying a big safe. We thought something valuable must be in this safe. We tried to open it, but we couldn't. Then along came an American tank. Our truck and the German vehicle with the safe on it were blocking the road. The tank stopped. We were in the way. The soldier driving the tank said to us that if we got out of his way, he would push the German vehicle off the road and we could all keep going. Then we told him about the safe. He said, "Let me back up and I will get a good round into it." He backed up and shot an AP into the safe, knocked it off of the truck, splitting it open. A huge amount of paper money flew into the air and dropped everywhere around us. It turned out that this was a German payroll truck carrying Italian lira. We gathered it up, but I don't think anyone benefited from this find. There was nowhere to spend this money, and after the war it was recalled and made worthless. I remember the time we were in trucks, 4 or 5 of them, traveling to some point, when we encountered a truck convoy of British 8th Army soldiers. The British convoy had stopped, blocking our progress, and we got out of our trucks to see what the problem was. The British had pulled over, dismounted, and were having their tea. We often saw teapots hanging from the backs of their tanks and lorries.
This was a common occurrence on the highway when the British had a convoy and they weren't really pushed. They would take a break on the side of the road and have tea.
It was hard to see animals suffer. The Germans used horses to transport their supply and arms, and the horses were often killed or wounded during shelling. Food was apt to be short. The Italian people often had very little to eat. After we ate, sometimes it was a hot meal, but whatever was left was scraped into the garbage. Children would line up waiting with their pails to get food out of the garbage we had just filled. I remember one little boy with his pail. I was giving him some food to take home, and I had some hot coffee. I asked him if he had another pail or can for the coffee, and he said no, and he gestured that I should put everything in the one pail. I remember once about 12 of us were quartered in a farmhouse. We had some supplies from the army kitchen. Coffee, flour, canned milk, sugar, canned tomatoes. We gave the farmer's wife these supplies. She was very pleased. She cooked us a delicious meal to say thank you, homemade spaghetti and sauce. She made coffee for our meal with the coffee we had given her. It was obvious that she was unfamiliar with the product because she used the whole pound to make our coffee, and of course it was almost fudge. I was with another soldier on some high point looking down into the valley on a farm, and we saw a German who looked like he might be a dispatch rider mounted on a horse. The soldier I was with said, "Watch me pick him off." He fired down. The distance was about 4,000 yards. He didn't hit the German. Instead, he killed the horse. The German ran off. We went down to the farmhouse. It took us about 2 hours to get there and look for the horse that had been killed. It wasn't there. The Italians had already skinned it and begun preparing it for cooking.
Unfortunately, we didn't get a meal out of that. Well, I had a horse at other places, but I never had it there.
The Germans were retreating north through the Brenner Pass. We were pushing them along and thus got to Lake Como. We couldn't pursue the Germans any further than this point because they had blocked the roads with artillery fire. The division regrouped and was billeted along the lake in the Italian village. It was a luxurious experience. We got bathed, got clean uniforms, and were served hot meals. At this time, we were close to the end of the war. When Germany surrendered, I was in the lake area. German soldiers were surrendering in large numbers, and as they did so, they were passed onto my squad to be taken back to the prisoners' compound. We were marching these prisoners back, and this German prisoner, a corporal, called me over to him and told me that I wasn't handling the prisoners, his fellow Germans, right, that I was too lenient, not hard enough on them. This German spoke English? Yes. From Lake Como, we, the Fifth Army, were transported to Trieste to stop the Russians from coming over from Yugoslavia into Italy. I was alone, I don't remember how come, by the border between Yugoslavia and Trieste. 2 Russian soldiers who had been celebrating were overjoyed to see an American soldier, me, and insisted on taking me back with them for a drink. We wound up in a house on the Yugoslavian side of the boundary, and the celebrating continued. A lot of vodka made the rounds. They put me on their shoulders and danced me around. They were enthusiastically hospitable and happy to have me as their special guest. When the party was over, they took me back to the border and handed me over to the MPs, who returned me to my company. The war was over. I returned to America from Italy on an army transport ship. It was a rough crossing. As you can see, I often kept company with potential disaster. I was lucky to come away alive, so many didn't. Here's a second enlistment now. I returned home. About a year later, I re-enlisted. The date was August 20th, 1946. I had a choice of theaters. I chose the European theater, but the Army instead sent me to Panama. The American Army presence there had to do, in the main, with the Panama Canal. I spent 3 years there. I was assigned to Quarry Heights on detached service. Detached service means separated from your regular outfit. I was made driver for Major General Brooks, commanding general for the Caribbean. While I was in Panama, my father died, and I was given an emergency leave. It happened that the general was flying up to Andover, Massachusetts at that time, so I flew back for my father's funeral with him. He dropped me off at LaGuardia Airport, and I was to meet him at the airport at the end of my leave for the return flight to Panama with him. What happened was that I missed his plane, and thus the Army had to find transportation to get me back to Panama. The best they could do was to put me on a commercial cruise ship sailing through the Panama Canal Zone with a boat full of vacationers. That was the most comfortable and enjoyable military transport I ever had during the whole 9 years I was in the Army. I left the Army on August 3rd, 1949, with an honorable discharge.
When I came home, I went for the war. I got a job as a mechanic in the North Shore Bus Company, but it wasn't to my satisfaction, so I left there. And I re-enlisted and went to Panama. These are things that I recall. There are other incidents that I don't recall very clearly, so I just eliminated them. I don't want to talk about something.
This is the conclusion of my interview with Owen Dunford.